The master's hand holds the tiny little baby.
All right, thank you so much for the introductions. And so I am Dr. Amy Sosa. I'm a licensed psychologist. I practice at Mercy Health and then also have a private practice in Lake Geneva. Eating disorders are near and dear to my heart, which is why when I relocated here, I found the Dorn family, and they have just been amazing in networking me with the community here. So I really want to thank Project Maria and all of the volunteers for hosting this event today. So in the spirit of vulnerability, so I'm not one to sit and just lecture. I encourage involvement in practicing vulnerability. So if you feel comfortable and want to move forward a little bit, just so it's a little bit more interactive, let me know. And I'll start out by asking if there's anything in particular you want to get from this topic. So the topic today that I've chosen to address is teens and eating disorders. So really exploring the relationship between food and body image, and then how that works within the family system. So we all know that eating disorder recovery does not happen in isolation. It takes a village, right? So an entire family, community, network, treatment team. And so it's important to address the full picture. So I hope to kind of touch on some points today and also give parents some tips in terms of what they can keep an eye out for, as well as what they can do to foster an environment of intuitive eating and health at every size within their households. So is there anything in particular, just opening it up to the audience, is there anything in particular you would like me to address or that you would like to know from this presentation? All right, we can go to the next slide. All right, so this is the outline, so I'm going to do an icebreaker. So in terms of learning, again, I'm not one to lecture. I'm one to really participate and be with the audience and hopefully have you walk away with something important today. So we're going to do an icebreaker to further reflect on our own relationship with our own bodies and food. Then I'm going to give you some statistics on eating disorders among adolescents. We're going to look at some studies regarding fat bias in children and some of the implications of that. And then we'll look at what parents can do. So we'll look up some more research findings, and then I'm going to present and talk more about what parents can do. And then to wrap up, we'll revisit the icebreaker and see, it's almost like a litmus test, seeing where you were when you started this presentation and where you are now. All right, next slide. Okay, so instead of paper, I thought it would be best just to reflect on yourselves. So what I want you to think about is, and first I want you to invite the word fat into your heads. So just think about the word fat. And I want you to think about the words that you associate with fat. So I'll give you a couple moments to think about the words, characteristics, what you would use or how you would describe personality traits, lifestyle choices when you think of the word fat. Okay. And then conversely, I want you to invite the word thin into your heads. And then I want you to meditate or think about lifestyle, personality, traits, characteristics when you think of the word thin. Okay? So just kind of keep an eye on that as we go through this presentation. Next, what I want you to do is think about food rules you follow. So if you put a moral value to food, so if there are good foods, bad foods, healthy foods, unhealthy foods. So think about how you navigate your day in terms of your relationship with food and good and bad foods. All right, so we're just going to keep a pulse on that as we go through this presentation. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so this just outlines the importance of knowing about eating disorders. So early detection or prevention is best, and then early detection, and then tertiary interventions. Eating disorders, even though these statistics look really low, in the United States alone, 30 million people are afflicted with an eating disorder. So anorexia nervosa is 0.3%, which seems low, but then when you put it in the context of 30 million people, it's a pervasive problem that has psychological and medical complications and implications that really warrant treatment. Bulimia nervosa is 0.9% of the population. Binge eating disorder is 1.6. Binge eating disorder is a newer diagnosis within the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that came out in 2012. And so this prevalence, this is newer research, and the numbers are actually even higher, so 2% and higher for binge eating disorder. Binge eating disorder is more than 3 times more common than anorexia and bulimia combined. And 40% of individuals with binge eating disorder are male. So eating disorders do not discriminate. They don't discriminate against race, socioeconomic status, gender. So it's important to become aware of all of the ways that eating disorders can affect your entire community. There are also what's called like a sub-threshold of anorexia. So those are like if you're following clean eating, if you can't eat certain things all the times, where there's a fixation on health that actually becomes unhealthy. And so that statistic is 0.8% of the population. Binge eating disorder is higher. And then this is why we're talking today's presentation is talking amongst teens, because the age of onset is 12 to 13 years old. And so in terms of our teenagers, they are definitely at risk, and it's important to provide protective factors to hopefully prevent an eating disorder from happening. All right, next slide, please. Okay. So I'm going to look through just in terms of households and what we can do to help prevent eating disorders. Sorry, I'm going to change this. Eating disorders among adolescents are often associated with functional impairment, and so that's when oftentimes they don't want to go to school, people go on hunger strikes, so there are lots of different ways. They isolate socially, start to wear lots of layers, don't want to eat lunch with others. Their grades start dropping because of malnourishment, and it's difficult to pay attention. So there are a lot of functional impairments associated with teenagers with eating disorders. Also, medical complications, death, and suicidality. So people with eating disorders are 40% more likely to attempt suicide. So that is, a very scary statistic that, again, warrants very serious intervention. So again, this kind of goes with a significant impairment that most teenagers, so up to 97%, reported significant impairment in many aspects of their life. And then, in particular, bulimia nervosa was associated with suicide plans, and bulimia nervosa and binge eating disorder were associated with suicide attempts. All right, next slide, please. All right. Okay, so this is also important because sometimes this happens, and then people say, like, they didn't learn this in my house. Where are they learning this? Kids obviously are infiltrated with information, right? So from their family, from their communities, from their schools, from the society in which we live. And so kids as young as 6 years old show that they show fat stigma or fat prejudice, to the point where, if you look at this one study, young girls and boys describe silhouettes as overweight children as being lazy, dirty, stupid, ugly, cheaters, and liars. So if we go back to the icebreaker that we did today, if I actually surveyed the room, most people would have similar descriptors in their minds when they think of fat, and similar descriptors when they think of thin, because this is pervasive within our society, and that's why events like these, we all have to come together to change the language and change the dialogue in terms of how we think about eating disorders. So again, 6-year-olds were shown drawings of normal weight children, an overweight child, and children with various disabilities. And then all children rated the overweight child as the least likable. Children are bullied for weight issues, or not weight issues, but if they're quote unquote overweight. So there's a lot of fear, and again, fat stigma and fat shaming along with that. 30 to 70% of individuals seeking treatment for an eating disorder were provided weight loss treatment. So this statistic is alarming, and I know that's a huge range, 30 to 70%. I would say it's closer to 70%, and in the work I do, I often then have to kind of undo a lot of the learning that well-intentioned medical providers were giving in terms of weight loss. So what I say with eating disorders, when someone comes in and their focus is weight loss, it's almost like someone with depression who's sleeping 15 hours a day. That's like prescribing them to sleep longer, right? And so it's really prescribing the symptom, and it has significant adverse effects that perpetuates the eating disorder for much longer. So it's actually maltreatment in terms of treating the person holistically with their eating disorder. All right, next slide. Okay, so then in this study, he looked at binge eating. So he looked at adult onset binge eating versus child onset binging. And he looked at 18 years old was the cutoff if you're a child or an adult. So 30% endorsed child onset binge eating. And then of the children who endorsed binge eating, after a binge, they reported significantly less anxiety than their adult counterparts. So it shows when kids start binge eating, and we'll talk about what some of the triggers are to binge eating, because there are many, from an early age, they're more likely to use that skill as a coping strategy because it's adaptive and it helps them decrease their anxiety. All right, and then we can kind of go through the rest. You guys can read the rest of it, but we'll go to the next slide. Okay. Again, looking at the age of binging versus the age of dieting, those who began binging before dieting began to binge earlier, so ages 11 to 13. And they also had more exposure to negative comments about their body and have an increased risk for depression. So this is where, again, if you think about the good, bad foods and then some of the weight stigma, if you have a child in a larger body and then some of the messages that child receives, then they may be more likely to eat in secret and binge eat the foods that are either adults say are forbidden for that child or that they don't allow themselves to have. All right, next slide. Okay. And then again, this looks more at secretive eating and overeating as risk factors for binge eating disorder. So this was a really interesting study because it looked at children ages 0 to 5 years old. So it was a longitudinal study over 5 years. And they looked at 18.1% of kids ate secretively and 33.8% of those children overate, and that they peaked. So the eating disorder behaviors actually progressed with each year that they aged. So what they found, because then they wanted to know, why are these kids restricting, or why are these kids overeating? Why are they eating in secret? And it was actually when parents restrict enjoyable foods that cause them to eat these foods more. So something I often say with my clients when there are certain foods that are forbidden, or, oh, I don't buy those foods in the house, then I'll look at my, teenage client and say, what do you eat at friends' houses? And they often eat the foods that were forbidden at their own house. And so we talk about incorporating those foods because all foods are okay, and it's important to send that message to not perpetuate these symptoms. And from the earlier studies, you guys have seen that when the risk for binge eating disorder early on, or binge eating early on, actually sets the stage for bulimia, depression, and other eating disorder diagnoses later in life. They also showed other factors that contributed to this. So which is interesting because they looked at maternal and paternal eating disinhibition, so like dysregulation around food, and mothers were more influential in that. Higher maternal body dissatisfaction, so when you're putting yourself down in front of your children, even if you don't mean to, but some of those messages that you might not even be aware of, those kids pick up on, all of those are correlated with secretive eating in children. And then maternal dietary restraints, so restraining what you eat, being on diets, as well as a higher drive for thinness, are associated with more overeating in children because, again, it's that vicious cycle between I can't eat this, I'm going to eat this in secret, and then when I have it available, then I overeat it. All right, next slide, please. All right. This is also interesting because when we think about intuitive eating, so if you guys have ever been around little kids and you put their favorite food in front of them, they eat when they're hungry and they stop when they're full, and they'll just push it away, even if it's their favorite food. So we all have that innate capacity within us. We lose it over time due to social cues, due to messages about dieting, due to many different reasons. So when kids are actually pressured to eat all the food on their plate, it's actually associated with some emotional disinhibition. Because when you think about it, emotional states are physiological states. So kids have to be connected or attuned to their bodies in order to understand or know what they're feeling emotionally. Same thing with eating. And when we start to sever that connection between mind and body with food, that translates to severing that connection emotionally. So then they're actually more emotionally dysregulated. Again, kids' perceptions of if their parents are restricting snacks, so they limit the access to snacks, that was also associated with dysregulation when enjoyable foods were available. And then again, same thing, that when parents report that they restrict girls' access to enjoyable foods, that was associated with an increased consumption of that food after a full meal. So when they're full, then they tend to eat more if that's a forbidden food. All right, next slide, please. Okay. I also thought this was interesting. Then we'll get to what you guys can all do as parents. Children of parents who use food as a reward were more likely to eat when stressed, because when kids are super excited and then they use food as a reward or as a treat, quote unquote, then they learn to regulate those really exciting feelings with food. And then when they're distressed, so those intense feelings one way or the other, they're more likely to use those foods use that as a coping skill. So use food as a coping skill. So what we talk about in eating disorder treatment is neutralizing food, that all food is food, all food is okay. So it's just sort of eating and moving on with life, appreciating food, seeing food as nourishment, but not putting it on this pedestal, because then again, that causes that emotional dysregulation. All right, next slide, please. So what can parents do? So parents can model intuitive eating. So again, it's eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're full, and eating to satiety. It's not a perfect art. So the best thing you can do is model flexibility. So allowing all foods to be okay. At times, I'm really full. I'm gonna rest or take a break. Same thing with just in terms of instead of, you have to finish your plate in order to have dessert, making dessert okay, because when you make dessert okay, kids aren't always going to want or crave dessert. Again, neutralizing food, so there's no moral value to food. Oftentimes when people feel guilty after eating a cookie, it's like, did you kill someone? What happened? Or they went to the grocery store, and if someone says, I did bad at the grocery store, I'm like, did you steal? What happened at the grocery store? And so it's really just looking at how much power those thoughts have in our minds and neutralizing food, again, so we can just see it as nourishment again. Celebrate differences. So this is a big one just in terms of body image. So celebrate all bodies. We have a lovely display of celebrating all bodies out there, that all bodies are okay. Watch the language that you use in your house just in terms of how you talk about yourself and the bodies of others. Next slide, because we'll talk about what else. Get rid of the scale. So when you model weighing yourself, then it's sort of weighing yourself as worth. And in terms of health at every size, weight is not a parameter of health. There are many other indicators of health. So when someone says, I want to be healthy, so I'm going to lose weight, I often ask, how are your labs? How are your vitals? Oh, they're fine. And so how are you measuring health? And so when you really look at this, metal or plastic device, and how much, the device is really just measuring your relationship to gravity, how much power that has over people's lives when they weigh themselves daily, weekly, even monthly. So just getting rid of the scale, because then that allows you to trust your body and trust what your body's going to do. Comment on qualities, traits, or achievements instead of focusing on, you look so good. Wow, you're so strong. Wow, you did a great job at that. So just more commenting on qualities of people instead of how they look. Model positive self-talk. So at my table, there are thank you cards where you can actually write a thank you card to yourself, because oftentimes we care a lot and focus a lot on other people and not so much ourselves. And so it's important to model taking care of yourself and liking yourself, and model confidence. Confidence is okay. And when kiddos and teenagers see that confidence, then they can stand taller, they can stand prouder, and then that's going to set them up for life. So movement is a big thing. Oftentimes people say exercise. So I have to exercise to lose weight. I have to exercise to burn calories. Or I have to eat a low-calorie meal. So again, food is fuel and exercise or movement is enjoyment. And so move because you want to, not because you have to or because someone is telling you to or because you ate something. So when you model like, today I'm tired, today, I'm just going to sit back and relax, or today, guess what, the weather's really nice, I'm feeling really good, I want to go out for a bike ride. When you practice that flexibility with food and you practice that flexibility with movement, then again, that empowers teenagers, or so kids and teens, to start to make decisions for themselves, and then that also translates to other relationships in their life, where then they can be more confident, they can be more assertive, they can take care of themselves in a better way. So, and then next slide. All right, so revisiting the icebreaker, and not that you necessarily has to shift, but again, the icebreaker was a way to really take inventory of where am I in my own relationship with my body? Where am I with these biases I have with fat and thin? So looking at how to shift your perspective in that way. And then think about a commitment. So I'm always, thinking about intentions and intentional living, and just setting an intention today of like, what can I do to either take care of myself, to, start to shift some of the culture in my family around food, to stand up for myself or speak when I hear something, just setting some sort of intention of something you can do today to help kind of carry this forward. So any questions, thoughts, impressions, anything that kind of struck you guys? No? All right. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your time. Thank you.
As we're setting up, our next performer coming onto stage just now is Ando Odea. He'll be playing an original composition on guitar. All right, I'll do this without my phone. All right. We're joined today by the Northside Intermediate School 6th grade choir.
About a quarter of us.
About a quarter of them. Mainly the girls.
Yep.
And they're here to perform a couple of songs that they did at their spring concert.
She just wants to be
Hi, my name is Teresa Smith. I'm a special education paraprofessional here at MHS. I'm also a certified nursing assistant, and I've worked with dementia patients and hospice patients for over 14 years, including introduction of therapy animals and helping people with dementia. I'm also alumni of UW-Whitewater with a BSc in art education and theater education. Over here is Jan. She is from UW-Whitewater, Associate Director of Career and Leadership Development. And here is our ACE Award winner, Sam, who's champion Laughing Dogs Saigon Cinnamon. He's had a really good career, both in therapy and working with people with dementia, and also his family. So if you'd like to go to the next slide. What is a therapy dog? A therapy dog is a dog who goes with their owner or volunteer to a setting such as schools, hospitals, and nursing homes. From working with children who have a hard time reading, or visiting with seniors in assisted living, therapy dogs and their owners work together as a team to improve the lives of other people. Therapy dogs are not service dogs, so they cannot go to certain areas, such as airports and other facilities. They should never be represented as a service dog. More recently, therapy dogs have been used to engage students in schools and universities. I know our school here at Milton High School has used them in the past too. Benefits of a therapy animal: they can teach empathy and interpersonal skills for students. They also help individuals develop social skills. They're very soothing presence and create a real good rapport. They've also improved individual skills by picking up social cues and relationships. I know this has really helped my son, who's had eating disorders and behavioral disorders. So he's had plenty of ACEs in his life. And I've noticed through the impact of Cedar, Cedar up there is his dog, has really improved his life. They've also been through 4-H and done a lot of really good bonding, and impacted him hugely. He now eats quite a bit more regularly and has really improved his life. The science and benefits of a therapy dog: it lowers their blood pressure and heart rate. It also reduces anxiety and increases the level of endorphins and oxytocin. So if you would please click on this link for Cheeto.
I'm Dr. Bruce Kaufman. I'm Chief of Pediatric Neurosurgery at the Children's Hospital of Wisconsin. In pediatric neurosurgery, we're caring for patients who have problems with seizures. We're caring for patients with brain tumors.
My name's Stuart Mason. I work very closely with the dog therapy program. Started it about 11 years ago, just with a couple of dogs to see how it goes. And now it's turned into one of the most amazing things that happen in the hospital. Their kids might be having a bad day, but a visit from a dog just brightens up their day and everyone else around's day.
Yeah, it's really relaxing because, I don't know, I love dogs and they bring all the smiles to the kids' face, so it's just really nice to see when the doggies come around, everyone just kind of physically relaxes and enjoys their time for a little bit.
Cheeto is now 3 years old and she's a Yorkshire Terrier. I think the most important thing for a therapy dog is that they are very calm. How are you? Good. Would you like a pet visit?
I would.
You would. This is Cheeto. And I'm going to put her down right there. Is that okay?
Yeah.
That's a safe place for her? Sit down, Cheeto.
It's really interesting to see how the children change in their behavior. It's not a threatening thing in their room. They really enjoy the interaction.
I think that this is probably one of the best visitors I've had.
The therapy dogs do help the kids in ways that we can't yet really measure, but it certainly makes it easier on them. They're not as not as anxious when we're around them either.
I'm here because of my externalization of my shunt. I've been stuck in here, and it's nice to have a dog again because I miss having dogs, and they make me happy.
It's such a joy for the parents, for the children to meet Cheeto, and then for them, when they're not here, I can always hope that it's because they went home. You know what Cheetos are? Have you ever eaten a Cheeto?
Would you like to say hi to Cheeto? I sure would.
All right. Want me to pick you up to some?
Hi.
This is Cheeto.
Hi.
She's a therapy dog here, children.
You want to go to the next slide? There you go. Okay, the benefits of therapy dogs in schools. This is from a quote from Engaging in Imagination, the Effects of Classroom K-9 program on reading and social emotional skills. And it shows that children working with therapy dogs experience increased motivation for learning, resulting in improved outcomes. Therapy dogs can be used to support children with social and emotional learning needs, which can in turn can assist with their literacy development. And research has shown that there's an increase in school attendance, a gain of confidence, a decrease in learners' anxiety, behaviors resulting in improved learning outcomes, and reading and writing skills, positive changes toward learning and improvement motivation, and enhanced relationships with peers and teachers due to the experience of learning that trust and unconditional love from a therapy animal. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So here is Sam and Jan's journey. Sam is a 2013 Cardigan Welsh Corgi Club of America Champion of the Heart, and also a 2013 Humane Fund ACE Award winner for exemplary companionship. He's helped Jan and her family and touched very many people in the Whitewater community. He's also worked with everyone from young college students to patients with dementia. So I'll hand this over to Jan.
Thanks, Teresa. How many of you have a pet at home that's a dog? Raise your hand. Okay, so we all many of us in here already know what an animal brings to the dynamic of a family. So Sam is 10 years old last week. And the lower right-hand corner is a picture of my parents who are in their 90s. And my dad started suffering from dementia, ischemic dementia, which is brought on by multiple strokes. And we had adopted Sam from a very loving breeder, Teresa. And when my dad would start getting agitated, Sam would go over and sit by him. And it was almost like there was an unknown cue. And so my dad would calm down and pet the dog. And that's when he was still able to live at home. And then later, he had to live in a memory care center because it wasn't safe in our home. There's a body of water quite near the home, and he was a wanderer. And so I would bring Sam to Hearthstone in Whitewater, and Sam would go from room to room. Now, part of that could be because Sam is a food hound, as you've probably noticed. I was giving him treats while we were up here. But I could tell, and the staff at Hearthstone could tell, or they would tell me, he's going to go see Sally first. And I'd let him off his leash, and he would go see Sally. So one of the things that I like to tell people about therapy dogs is that your dog in your home right now can be a therapy dog. It could be already being a therapy dog, right? It doesn't, there are a lot of ways that you can, Teresa's going to talk about how to get your dog certified as a therapy dog. But think about a time when you've been anxious, you've been depressed, you've been overexcited, all those things that happen to all of us as people. Dogs read that because I don't usually stand up and say to my husband, I'm really anxious right now, could you please leave me alone, right? I usually demonstrate that in another way. And dogs read that other way. They read nonverbal cues. So Sam could pick up when my dad was starting to get agitated. And so before he ever got unmanageable, he would go over and take care of it. And that's what really therapy dogs do, is they really read the nonverbal part that we as humans have forgotten how to read. And so I think one of the nice things for our family is that my mom, I lost my dad a year ago, and Sam has really adopted my mother. We joke that Sam is not my dog. He's my mom's dog. And on the days that her blood pressure is high, he goes over and sits on her feet, and she takes her blood pressure later, and it's at least 10 points lower. So I don't have a whole lot of science, as the video said earlier, but I would encourage you, if there's someone in your family who's sad or has an eating disorder or has anxiety or depression in their life, to engage the animals in your life to help that process, or to seek out someone who is officially or unofficially a therapy dog. I don't think my family could have managed the last 4 years with my dad's dementia and cancer diagnosis without a daily treatment of Sam Love. And that's just not, I guess it's biased, right? Because I love my dog, but I've seen it work, and I know that it's impacted a ton of college students in the last 6 years as well. They come over to my house for Sam therapy, and I now have a younger corgi that's participating in that, and it's actually helping students study. They come to my house and they sit on the ground and they get out their laptops and the dogs sit next to them, and it really helps concentration as well. So if any of those things impact your family, engage your own dog in that process, or reach out to some of the resources that Teresa's going to talk about to help you find places where there are therapy dogs, and you can absolutely come down after we're done and pet him.
Okay, if you go to the next slide, please. Okay, Audrey is Sam's sister. She's in California. She's also has a natural ability to work with therapy with children and adults, and the counselor, Lydia Rorick, who's a psychologist down there, has her, and she joins her sessions, and she wrote to me saying sometimes she chooses to sit beside a client or frequently gets up on the couch right behind them and stays there. It makes clients feel good, feel special, and has given them comfort. Absolutely everyone is crazy about her, loves her energy. Many clients look forward to seeing her every week and feel a special connection to her. She's very calm and sweet and sometimes playful and silly. She's a total plus and adds an extra element of connection in the sessions, and she chooses to be in. Other clients are greeted by her, and she doesn't come into those sessions. People love to pet her because she is incredibly calm and still, while clearly enjoying being petted. If I could clone her, just about everyone who meets her would want her. So if you want to go to the next slide, of course we've, for confidentiality, blocked out some people's faces, but this is her at work, working with students and other people in a therapy capacity. AKC therapy dog title and certification. These are the different requirements for it. You have to socialize your puppy or dog to new people, places, objects, and surfaces. That means taking them out places, making sure they meet other people and dogs. There's a lot of pet-friendly places around Janesville that do allow dogs to come in. Obtain an AKC good citizenship title on your dog and train necessary behaviors for therapy work, including look so that they look at you and give you eye contact, to leave it so that they are able to drop an item, have a loose leash walk, and to not jump on people, of course, which can be fun sometimes to train. Obtaining the AKC Advanced Canine Certification title is also a good thing, because you go through distraction proofing so that they won't be running off if another dog comes in, or something else. They also will drop things so that the dog will not be scared to certain noises or sounds that they might encounter, especially in new places and hospitals. Enrolling your dog in therapy classes will prepare you and your dog. There's certain equipment and preparation that you need to learn. Most of these classes will have an evaluation at the end. And then registration with the National Therapy Organization. This is highly recommended for most therapy dogs to provide support, advance, and also insurance. Many places, hospitals, will not have a therapy dog come in unless they are under one of the therapy dog organizations. They also have strict guidelines as far as having the dogs washed and how they're handled, so that they aren't bringing any contaminants in to the patients. So if you'd like to go to the next slide. So therapy, our local therapy organization, Pet Pals through our UW School of Veterinary Medicine. They have a wonderful program. I encourage you to go look at that. And also Dogs on Call. They're registered with Pet Partners. They are another awesome organization to look at. They go into schools and other places too. The AKC nationally recognizes these therapy programs and only these programs. So if you're looking at a therapy dog or bringing one into somewhere, please make sure that you go and make sure they are certified under one of these programs. Next slide, please. I hope you can experience the amazing power of a therapy dog like Sam. If you could please watch this video, it will show you the amazing how they can touch you. Thank you guys very much. I hope you can enjoy Sam for some therapy yourself.
Broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find the fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Move mountains, we gon' walk it out and move mountains. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. And I'll rise up, high like the waves, I'll rise up, in spite of the ache, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you, for you. Se oye ruido en el silencio y sientes que no puedes respirar. Sientes que te estás muriendo, pero morir cuando al fin tú te levantarás a mover montañas, te levantarás a mover montañas. Levantamos la voz y la fe, levantamos el amor y el poder, levantamos y lo haremos una y otra vez. Por ti, por ti, por ti, por ti. All we need, all we need is hope. And for that we have each other. And for that we have each other. And we will rise up. We'll rise. I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up in spite of the ache. I will rise 1,000 times again. And we'll rise up, high like the waves. We'll rise up, in spite of the ache. We'll rise up, we'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you, for you.
This piece was written by Sherry Monarch. It's entitled, If It Were Cancer. Cancer. It's one word, a single word, a powerful word. When spoken, it's a word that immediately elicits compassion, empathy, support, understanding, and action. It is one word that immediately garners the support of family, friends, a team of physicians, and will compel people to start walks, fundraisers, galas, GoFundMes, meal support, you name it. Cancer will mandate that there be an army of warriors surrounding the family and patient as they walk this journey, and it should. Cancer. A longtime friend recently posted that his daughter is battling cancer. Of course, it immediately elicited my empathy and understanding. How can I help? My friend is aware that our family had a loved one that struggled with an eating disorder. He understood that as a parent, this was the worst possible thing that could have ever happened to me, that I would have gladly taken the place of my daughter, that I would have given anything to bear her pain and suffering. He understood that my journey of a child with a life-threatening illness was worse than my own 2 open heart surgeries. I messaged him and offered support. I shared how very sorry I was for what his daughter and his family were enduring, that I can't imagine how difficult cancer has been for them. I was not prepared for his reply. Actually, you don't have to imagine watching your child go through something like this. You lived it. Different disease, but just as deadly, and probably more difficult to treat. The leukemia my daughter has a very well-developed treatment protocol that's used throughout the entire country, and there's constant collaboration between all of the treatment centers. I know that is not the same with eating disorders. Hell, you still have to fight to get it recognized as a disease, and not just some silly little girl who won't eat. To me, your battle seems harder. My conversation with my friend caused me to do a lot of reflection. Having a loved one battling an eating disorder is much like battling cancer. It is one of the most challenging and most difficult journeys of our life. Some of us may be battling to get a diagnosis. Others of us may have been given a diagnosis, but are trying to understand what's happening. The difference with eating disorders is no one is provided with a handbook on how to heal your loved one from an eating disorder. Follow this protocol. Instead, we're left with minimal guidance, minimal support, lots of questions, no direction, a lot of confusion, and no respite care. There are conflicting messages everywhere. You or your loved one are a shell of their former self and barely recognizable. As a parent, you're doing everything you can to provide care, support, and just try to understand what the hell is going on. You just know that a terrorist is holding your loved one captive. In fact, he's holding your entire family captive. When our loved one has an eating disorder, it's like the whole family has an eating disorder. What's the answer? How can we help ourselves or our loved one navigate this journey with an eating disorder? How can we help others understand the journey? When I was walking this journey with my loved one, it really helped me to reframe every step of the process in terms of cancer. If it were cancer. The thing that's important to quickly understand is that food and stopping behaviors is their chemo. Without chemo, they will die. Without food, they will die. Every decision, every action, every statement needs to be addressed in terms of cancer. If it were cancer. If it were cancer, would it immediately evoke empathy, compassion, support, and action? If it were cancer, would you think you or your loved one chose it? Would you think they could just stop? If it were cancer, would it allow your loved one to refuse the medicine or the treatment? If it were cancer, would you think it was a phase? Would you think that it would just go away? If it were cancer, would you negotiate whether or not they need chemo? If it were cancer, would you run cancer around life or life around cancer? If it were cancer, would you hesitate to find the best practitioners in the country, in the world? If it were cancer, would you even think about school? Would you be concerned about graduations or college applications and whether they graduate with their twin? If it were cancer, would you search out the best possible program or just go with the one that's closest? If it were cancer, would you allow a provider to wait a month or 2 or 3 until the next appointment? Would you wait until next week to call for an appointment? If it were cancer, would you schedule treatment around holidays, vacations, school, or summer camps? If it were cancer, would you accept partially healed, or would you push for full recovery and remission? If it were cancer, would you hesitate to share with family, friends, or your entire community? If it were cancer, would you let them leave the treatment program before the chemo was complete? If 10 chemo treatments were prescribed, would you let them stop after 5? If it were cancer, would you postpone or delay treatment because they're looking a little better? If it were cancer, would you let them forego the chemo because it caused them distress and made them sick? If it were cancer and your loved one called right after they started treatment and said, "I hate it and I want to come home," would you let them? If it were cancer, would you care what friends, family, or neighbors said, or would you just be focused on getting your loved one well? If it were cancer, would you accommodate it or do everything possible to eradicate it? If it were cancer, would you be passive or would you be aggressive? If it were cancer, would you be angry at your loved one? Would you lose your temper? Would anyone in the family be upset or angry? Would there be any hesitation to support the family or the patient? If it were cancer, would you remember that you have to take care of yourself so that you can take care of your loved one? If it were cancer, would you ever blame yourself? Would you ever think that you caused the cancer? If it were cancer, would you accept the first medical practitioner recommended, or would you ask questions and seek out the best? If it were cancer, would you ask me or my loved one, "How did you get cancer?" If it were cancer, would you validate the struggle, or would you judge and interrogate? If it were cancer, would you penalize them for missing school? If it were cancer, would you send cards and bring meals? Would you offer to help? If it were cancer, would you offer to watch the kids so the carers could get a night away? If it were cancer, would you unite the neighbors, school families, and church members to support the family and the patient? Or would you look the other way? Would you do nothing? If it were cancer, would you reach out to the family if you had not heard from them for a week, a month, a year? If it were cancer, would we be demanding more research, more funding, more grants and scholarships? Would we accept no? If it were cancer, would nations, organizations, and populations join hands to eradicate? If it were cancer, would you hesitate to give your employee time off, or would you offer them to take all the time their family needs? If it were cancer, would you ignore the prescribed treatment of the treatment team and allow the insurance company to determine what is best practice or best care for the patient? If it were cancer, would you tell the family that their loved one needs to do this alone? If it were cancer, would you ever tell the patient, "They're not that sick"? If it were cancer, would you listen to the family's concerns when they approached you? If it were cancer, would you tell them it's none of their business? Would you tell them to walk away? Would you tell them you can do this on your own? If it were cancer, would you refuse treatment? Would you battle your family, or would you listen? If it were cancer, would you understand why your family is so scared? If it were cancer, would you think your family is trying to control you? Would you think that your family is trying to smother you? Or would you think my family really loves me? If it were cancer, would you allow your family to hold your hand as you navigate treatment? If it were cancer, would you allow them to comfort you when you're struggling? If it were cancer, would you allow family and friends to love you, to hug you, or would you isolate? If it were cancer, would you trust them and want them to carry your pain? If it were cancer, would you run to them or from them? If it were cancer, would you understand that this is the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to your family? Would you understand that their fears are justified? If it were cancer, would you have done anything different? Would you have taken a different path? If it were cancer, would you think it is serious? The bottom line is eating disorders are just as deadly as cancer. In fact, without treatment, up to 20% will die. They have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness, and they are the third most chronic illness in adolescence. Every 62 minutes, someone dies as a direct result of an eating disorder. 23 lives lost every single day. So as you're navigating this journey yourself, with a loved one, with a patient, or with a friend, and you're pondering what to do or what to say, how to support someone who is struggling, determining your next step, questioning what the right path is. Think about reframing it. If it were cancer. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Opala Billhorn, and this is the Milton Area Homeschool Choir. It's a group of students between about 4th and 12th grade, and we rehearse all during the school year and do performances throughout the year, and we are so pleased to be with you all tonight and to be a part of this really special event. So the first piece we have is I Have Confidence. And this is a solo by Melody Cottier.
What will this day be like? I wonder. What will my future be? I wonder. It could be so exciting to be out in the world, to be free. My heart should be wildly rejoicing. Oh, what's the matter with me? I've always longed for adventure, to do the things I've never dared. Now here I'm facing adventure. Then why am I so scared? A captain with 7 children was so fearsome about that. Oh, I must stop these doubts, all these worries. If I don't, I just know I'll turn back. I must dream of the things I am seeking. I am seeking the courage I lack. The courage to serve them with reliance. Face my mistakes without defiance. Show them I'm worthy, and while I show them, I'll show me. So let them bring on all their problems. I'll do better than my best. I have confidence, they'll put me to the test. I'll make them see I have confidence in me. Somehow I will impress them. I will be firm but kind. And all those children, heaven bless them. They will look up to me and line me with each step. I am more certain everything will turn out fine. I have confidence the world would all be mine. They'll have to agree I have confidence in me. I have confidence in sunshine. I have confidence in rain. I have confidence that spring will come again. Besides which, you see, I have confidence in me. Strength doesn't lie in numbers. Strength doesn't lie in walls. Strength lies in nights of peaceful slumbers. When you wake up is healthy. All I trust, I leave my heart to. All I trust becomes my own. I have confidence and confidence alone. Oh, hell. I have confidence and confidence alone. Besides which, you see, I have confidence.
Our next piece is accompanied by one of the students in the choir, Allison Fox, Peace Like a River, Kumbaya. Our next piece is The Prayer by Liesl and Aidan Howard.
Just where we go and help us to be wise in times when we don't know. Let this be our prayer when we lose our way. With your grace to a place where we'll be safe.
La luce che tu hai,
I pray we'll find your light
nel cuore resterà,
and hold it in our hearts.
a ricordarci che
stars go out each and watch us from above. We hope each soul will find another soul to know. Let this be our prayer. Let this be our prayer.
Just like every child.
Just like every child. Need to find a place. Guide us with your grace. Give us faith so we'll be saved. Hero decay, high excess Sento che ci salve. At me, I will never pass for a perfect bride or a perfect daughter. Can it be? I'm not meant to play this part. Now I see that if I were truly to be myself, I would break my family's heart. Who is that girl I see staring straight back at me? Why is my reflection someone I don't know? Somehow I cannot hide who I am, though I've tried. When will my reflection show who I am inside? When will my reflection show who I am inside? Through a storm, keep your chin up high, and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm is a golden sky and the sweet silver song of a lark. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, the give your heart to Jesus, place your hand in the Master's hand.
The Master's hand gives you help in times of trouble. The Master's hand gives you strength in times of need. Sinner man, won't you listen to his plan? Place your hand in the Master's hand.
Hold his hand, oh brother, he will save you.
There's no other who can make you whole.
Hold his hand, oh sister, he'll forgive you. Come to Jesus, he will save your soul. Come to Jesus, he will save your soul. The Master's hand holds the tiny little baby. He'll take his children to the promised land. Sinner man, won't you open up your heart now? Place your hand in the Master's hand. Hold his hand, oh brother, he will save you.
There's no other who can make you whole.
Hold his hand, oh sister, he'll forgive you. Come to Jesus, he will save your soul. Come to Jesus, he will save your soul.
Place your hand in the hand, the Master's hand. Place your hand in the hand, the Master's hand. Place your hand in the hand, the Master's hand. Hand in the hand, the Master's hand. Place your hand in the hand, the Master's hand.
Hold his hand, oh brother, he will save you.
He will lift you from the sinking sand.
Hold his hand, oh sister, he'll forgive you. Place your hand in the Master's hand. Place your hand in the Master's hand. Place your hand in the Master's hand.
for letting us be here.
This is like my chance to get on the mic before my husband gets out. Like, oh, gee, take your time, hon. Yeah, it's like if you give a mouse a cookie, if you give a chick a mic.
Let's see if I can look at it and
talk
the
at the same time.
Yeah, it's very complex.
All right.
I dream of life without a monarchy. The unrest in France will lead to anarchy. Anarchy? How you say? It's anarchy. When I fight, I make the other side panicky with my...
Shot! Yo, I'm a tailor's apprentice. I got y'all knuckleheads and local parentis. I'm joining the rebellion because I know it's my chance to socially advance. Instead of sewing some pants, I'm going to take a shot.
But we'll never be truly free until those in bondage have the same rights as you and me. You or I, do or die, wait till I stallion on a stallion. With the 1st Black Battalion, have another shot.
Geniuses, lower your voices. You keep out of trouble and you double your choices. I'm with you, but our situation is fraught. You've got to be carefully taught. If you talk, you're gonna get shot.
Bird, check what we got. Mr. Lafayette, hard like Lancelot. I think your pants look hot. Lawrence, I like you a lot. Let's hatch a plot blacker than the kettle calling the pot. What are the odds the gods will put us all in one spot? Pop it a squat. Unconventional wisdom, like it or not, a bunch of revolutionary manumission abolitionists. Give me a position, show me where the ammunition is.
Whew. And those words made the under 30 crowd sit up and take notice of musical theater in a way they hadn't done for quite some time. It's also poetry. And its poet, Lin-Manuel Miranda, did an interview on NPR about how Alexander Hamilton enters that scene with a different style and a different rhyme scheme, which sets him apart from his buddies for every scene to come. So, good evening, folks. I'm Becky Hansen.
And I'm Dan Hansen, and we are your poetry professors. Our line for our side business is teaching people poetry is less guessing, more accessing. Because poetry should not be the guessing game that so many of us have been taught that it is. We're here tonight to celebrate art, to celebrate health, to celebrate our community. We're here because we have a relationship with poetry that we know that many people, who struggle with biological disorders and mental health disorders, sometimes this is their escape. This is their thing. I first started writing poetry struggling with depression in my teens, little knowing that eventually I would find someone who also loved poetry and that would be something that we would bond over. To bring attention to some of these issues and to the art and beauty that is poetry and how people can, find themselves through words, we've brought you a number of poems tonight. Poems that we hope will lift you up, maybe even some that make you laugh.
When we think of poetry, I know there's people out there like, oh my gosh, not poetry, right? Old guys sitting in front of a fire, drinking tea.
Hey, I like fires and tea.
Yeah, I know you do. But love poems don't always have to compare thee to a summer's day. Let's be real.
You're nothing like a summer's day.
I'm not gonna be nobody's summer day. No. But sometimes love poems can tell a little bit of a different story. So this is the poem that I'm going to sit down and listen to and try not to cry through, because this is the poem that made me fall in love with my husband. It is called An Open Letter to Neil Armstrong by Mike McGee.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Dear Neil Armstrong, I write this to you as she sleeps down the hall because I need answers that I think only you might have. When you were a boy and space was simple science fiction, when flying was merely a daydream between periods of history and physics, when gifts of moon dust to the ones you love could only be wrapped in your imagination, before the world knew your name, before it was a destination, what was the moon like from your backyard? Your arm, strong, warm, wrapped under her hair, both of you gazing up from the back porch summers before your distant journey. But upon landing, when the earth rose over the sea of tranquility, did you look for her? What was it like to see our planet and know that everything you could be, all you could ever love and long for, was just floating before you? Did you write her name in the dirt when the cameras weren't looking, surrounding both your initials with a heart for alien life to study a million years from now? What's it like to love something so distant? What words did you use to bring the moon back to her? And what did you promise in the moon's ear brought the girl back home? Can you teach me to fall from the sky? I ask you all this not because I doubt your feet. I just want to know what it's like to go somewhere that no man has ever been before, just to find out she's not there. To realize your moonwalk could never compare to the steps that lead to her. I know now the flight home means more. Every July, I think of you. I imagine the summer of '69, how lonely she must have felt while you were gone. You never went back to the moon. And I believe that's because it doesn't take rockets to get to where you belong. I see that in this woman down the hall, and sometimes she seems so much further. But I'm ready for the steps that I must take to get to her. I have seen many skies, and the moon always looks the same. So I gotta say, the rock that you landed on has got nothing on the rock she's landed on. You walked around, took some samples and left, but she has built a fire, cleaned up the place, and I hope she decides to stay. On this one, we can breathe. Mr. Armstrong, I don't have much. Many times I've been upside down trodden, but with these empty hands comes a heart that is full more often than the moon. She is becoming my world, pulling me into orbit, and I know I may never find life outside of hers. I want to give her everything I don't have yet. So for her, I would go to the moon and back, but not without her. We'll claim the moon for each other with flags made from sheets down the hall, and I'd risk it all to kiss her under the light of the earth, the brightness of earth. But I can do all that and more right here wherever she is. And when we gaze up with my arm around her, I will not promise her gifts of moon dust or fights of fancy. I will gladly give her all the earth she wants in return for all the earth she is. The sound of heartbeat and laughter and all the time it takes to fall from the sky, down the hall, and right into love. I'd do it every day if I could just land next to her. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 small step for man. Just one giant leap for my kind. This journey of ours, exploring and teaching teachers how to teach poetry more effectively, has given us the privilege of watching poets emerge. The next poem is by Dr. Sarah Ettlinger, a professor at Rock Valley College in Rockford. She's getting ready to release her second book of poetry called Little Human Things. She was on one of our early podcasts, and now she's nominated for a Pushcart Prize. Not saying there's a connection, but if you'd like to interpret one, we'd love that. She gave us special permission to share this poem with you. It isn't even out yet. It's called Thank Goodness for the Poets by Sarah Ettlinger.
They're the ones who can help you find streams and rivers of green in the sunlight, or a crisp ridge of opal at the moment the wine hits your throat to warm it. And they'll tell you how a crack looks like the sound of leaves crunched on a sidewalk, or that a teapot whistling recalls the taste of spring. And they will tell you that maybe your best color is vanity, and perhaps, maybe, after all, you could wear it just a little bit more, but only on the weekends, because it flushes your cheeks so beautifully. Yes, thank goodness for the poets, because without them, there would be no you and I to dance in the whispers dusk leaves on the pillows, whose kisses birds echo as they forgive the night and greet the day from auspicious branches. And when I was talking to Sarah tonight, she was like, be sure to remind them that my first book, Never One for Promises, is currently available on Amazon. One thing that we're all here to do tonight is to recognize that sometimes people are fighting invisible battles. And we talked a little bit about that as we got started. Neil Hilburn, if you've never heard of him, you should go look him up and watch everything he's ever done. We had the privilege of seeing him in Madison just a couple weeks ago. But he became really popular for a poem that he did called OCD, a poem that we will never perform because we could never, ever do it justice. But I highly recommend you go watch his TED Talk about poetry and and watch him perform the poem. So instead, we've brought a different relationship poem of Neil's here tonight called Fabric Swatches and Paint Samples.
I will, in all my hereditary optimism, try to be honest, my dear. Not particularly about where I am, just particularly about where I am and with whom, but also where I am in the vast melodramatic plane that is my feelings, and where I placed you, and how exactly to cross the stupid desert to find me. There is quicksand in the stupid desert that I call my exes. They don't hate you, but my darling, they also do not know you, which is also to say that which is not to say that I don't speak of you, because I do. I do to my therapist, who I fired, and to women at bars and at work and at roller derby doubts who confuse me for an exit sign. Darling, I use you, yes, but to feel secure or loved or like a tire wrapped in chains. Let us say that I do not use you abnormally. All this is to say that should you move here to live with me and the mental disorders I call friends, and mental disorders, I will not lie to you. The sea is so wide, and our boat is so small. As you can tell, he has a sort of interesting style to his poetry.
And a little bit
That's not just me being nervous, that's me acting.
and a love-hate with who he is and how his mental disorders play into who he is and his relationships. And he's married now and they're very happy, but it's a great dynamic to listen to play out in his poetry. The final poem that we've brought you tonight is by our favorite former U.S. Poet Laureate, Billy Collins. It is people having a conversation about a poem, probably the way you think most people sit around and have conversations about poems.
People that aren't us, because we actually do.
We don't sound a lot like this, though.
No, not true.
I hope that by hearing it and by hearing the poet laureate himself make fun of how people think we need to talk about poetry will make you a little bit more open to the process yourself, to exploring what is out there. And if you'd like to do it with us, please feel free to check out our podcast, The Poetry Professors. We're online at thepoetryprofessors.com. We're on the Poetry Professor podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. But here is Workshop by Billy Collins. I might as well begin by saying how much I like the title. It gets me right away because I'm in a workshop now, so immediately the poem has my attention. Like the ancient mariner grabbing me by the sleeve.
And I like the first couple of stanzas, the way they establish this mode of self-pointing that runs through the whole poem. It tells us that words are food thrown down on the ground for other words to eat. I can almost taste the tail of the snake in its own mouth. You know what I mean.
But what I'm not sure about is the voice, which sounds in places very casual, very blue jeans, but other times seems standoffish, professorial in the worst sense of the word. Like the poem is blowing pipe smoke in my face. But maybe that's just what it wants to do.
What I did find engaging were the middle stanzas, especially the fourth one. Like, I like the image of clouds flying like lozenges. It gives me a very clear picture, right? And I really like how this drawbridge operator just appears out of the blue with his feet up on the iron railing and his fishing pole jigging. I like jigging. A hook in the slow industrial canal below. I love slow industrial canal below. All those
Maybe it's just me, but the next stanza is where I start to have a problem. I mean, how can the evening bump into the stars? And what's an obligato of snow? Also, I roam the decaffeinated streets. At that point, I'm just lost. I need help.
The other thing that throws me off, and maybe this is just me, the way the scene keeps shifting around. Like first we're in a big aerodrome, and the speaker's inspecting a row of dirigibles. Makes me think it could be a dream. But then he takes us into the garden, and the part with the dahlias and the coiling hose. Although that's nice, the coiling hose. But then I'm not sure where we're supposed to be. Like the rain and the mint green light makes it feel outdoors, but what about the wallpaper? Or is it an indoor kind of cemetery? There's something about death going on here. In fact, I have to start to wonder if what we have here is really 2 poems, or 3, or 4, or 0. Possibly none.
But then there's that last stanza, my favorite. This is where the poem wins me back, especially the line spoken in the voice of the mouse. I mean, we've all seen these images in cartoons before, but I still love the details he uses when he's describing where he lives, the perfect little arch of the entrance in the baseboard, the bed made out of the curled back sardine can, the spool of thread for a table. I just started thinking about how hard the mouse had to work night after night collecting all these things while the people in the house were fast asleep. And that gives me a very strong feeling, a very powerful sense of something. But I don't know if anyone else was feeling that. Maybe it's just me. Maybe that's just the way I read it.
Probably. We hope none of your poetry experiences are like that. And we would encourage you to get out and read different kinds. Whatever you're facing in your life, whatever anyone of your loved ones is facing, there are poets out there talking about those things. And it can be very powerful to read and identify with somebody who's found the magic words to say what you've been thinking this entire time. We are the Poetry Professors. We hope you will do less guessing
and more accessing.
Thank you.
Poetry Professors. That was very entertaining. We have one final presenter tonight. It's Ms. Courtney Karnock, and she'll be talking about when clean eating gets dirty. Just give us a moment while we reset the stage, and once again, bring in the world's slowest projector screen.
Good evening. Nice. Can you hear me? All right, nice. Clean eating. It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. Unprocessed, organic, no sugar added, definitely no corn syrup. I'm only going to eat real food. Local, simple, whole, unprocessed, all natural. I am taking control of my life, taking charge of my health. No more junk food, no more garbage food, no more hyper-palatable, mass-produced, over-processed, sugar-laden, artificial dyes, artificial colors, artificial chemicals, pesticides, genetically modified, poison. Clean eating is en vogue. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I guarantee you every person in this room has probably had a thought about whether a food you were eating is good or bad. The problem is when these judgments about good or bad foods become internalized and you start to judge yourself as good or bad. I'm good because I ate clean today. Or I'm so bad because you ate dirty? What does that even mean? Clean eating and the catchphrase, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle, has become the new diet in this diet culture and wellness culture that we are all swimming in. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with making conscious choices to nourish your body with foods that feel good and support a good quality of life. However, it is Project Maria's mission to spread awareness about eating disorders.
And frankly, clean eating is code for dieting. The intentional restriction and control of food for emotional or moral reasons or for health reasons, and frankly, in most cases, people don't mind if they're controlling their weight. Dieting is a huge risk factor in the development of eating disorders. Bulimia, anorexia, binge eating, OSFED, and now orthorexia, which technically is not a diagnosis in the DSM-5, but the unhealthy obsession with healthy eating is becoming more and more prevalent in this wellness culture that we live in. This is the dirty side of clean eating. With our growing infatuation with food morality, more and more people are becoming stifled by the rigid rules surrounding their healthy lifestyles. Clean eating can really be a slippery slope, and it flies under the radar in many cases of eating disorders because we do, as a culture, value and extol the virtue of clean eating and being good and eating real foods. We talk about junk foods, we talk about processed foods and added sugars and refined sugars and this demonizing of bad foods. Chemicals are bad. Oddly enough, all of our foods are made of chemicals. There's your banana. Food fear-mongering is so commonplace today, and the demonizing of our junk food is really problematic. This can be very dangerous, and I urge parents to really watch your language when discussing your food choices in front of your children. Think in neutral terms. Not good foods, not bad foods, not junk foods. Think neutral, and all foods fit. When thoughts of what you are consuming start to consume you, when fear and anxiety start to paralyze your ability to enjoy life and spontaneity, when you can no longer go out for social interactions without worrying about what kind of food is going to be available to eat, or when 90% of your day is preoccupied and distracted about your food choices and where it comes from and what chemicals are in it, and is it organic or is there gluten, you may want to take a step back. When the rigidity of sticking to a healthy lifestyle encroaches on the quality of your life, you may want to take a step back. The magical thinking that the perfect, chemical-free, all-natural food diet is somehow going to miraculously elevate you to immortality or a perfectly disease-free future is very erroneous thinking, and again, can be a very dangerous, slippery slope. Not everyone who enjoys a healthy lifestyle is going to have an eating disorder or has an eating disorder. But I do urge you all to be aware of the dirty side to clean eating. I do urge you to be aware that it can turn into a mental nightmare. And I definitely urge you to seek professional help if you have any of these struggles. And there are resources available, specifically intuitive eating or the Ellen Satter Institute can offer really good, intuitive, unharmful insight into food approaches and even child feeding approaches to have a neutral and healthy relationship with food. So lastly, I want to leave you with this from Ellen Satter. It's my favorite. way to think about eating and the approach, because if not clean eating, and if not dieting or healthy lifestyling, what is the alternative? And Ellen refers to this as normal eating. So what is normal eating? Normal eating is going to the table hungry and eating until you are satisfied. Normal eating is being able to choose food you enjoy and to eat it and truly get enough of it, not just stop eating because you think you should. Normal eating is being able to give some thought to your food selection so you get nutritious food, but not being so wary and restrictive that you miss out on enjoyable food. Normal eating is giving yourself permission to eat because you are happy, sad, or bored, or just because it feels good. Normal eating is mostly 3 meals a day, or 4 or 5, or it can be choosing to munch along the way. Normal eating is leaving cookies on the plate because you will let yourself have cookies again tomorrow, or eating more now because they taste so great. Normal eating is overeating at times and feeling stuffed and uncomfortable, and undereating at times and wishing you had more. Normal eating is trusting your body to make up for mistakes in eating. Normal eating takes up some of your time and attention, but it keeps its place as only one important area of your life. In short, normal eating is flexible. It varies in response to your hunger, your schedule, your food, and your feelings. Thank you.
The master's hand holds the tiny little baby. He'll take his children to the promised land. Sinner man, won't you open up your heart now? Place your hand in the master's hand. Hold his hand, a brother, he will save you.
There's no other who can make you whole.
Hold his hand, oh sister, he'll forgive you.
Come to Jesus, he